Jordan Whitfield was 34 years old, and in 20 minutes, he was supposed to walk down the aisle toward the woman he believed was his future. He had paid $40,000 for this wedding himself. He had added her name to his investment property deed 3 days earlier. He had built everything he owned from nothing. A working-class kid from Memphis who became a named architect in Atlanta through discipline alone. He thought he had finally chosen right. Then Adrian's father walked into his private room, hands trembling, eyes unable to meet his. Douglas Calloway was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He poured a glass of water, drank it slowly, and said 7 words so quietly, Jordan almost missed them. "Leave my daughter before it's too late." Then he walked out before Jordan could speak. Jordan stood alone in that room, in his wedding suit, with 200 guests waiting on the other side of a door. And something shifted behind his eyes. What Jordan Whitfield did next would cost Adrian everything she had spent 3 years carefully planning. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Jordan Whitfield stood in his home office, morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows onto the drafting table where blueprints lay carefully arranged. His fingers traced the clean lines of his latest project, a community center that would serve South Atlanta. Even on his wedding day, he couldn't resist reviewing the work that had defined his life for so long. The suit hanging on his closet door caught his eye. Italian wool in deep charcoal, perfectly tailored. A far cry from the second-hand clothes he'd worn growing up in Memphis, where his mother had stretched every dollar to keep food on the table and dreams alive in her only child's heart. He remembered those early mornings at the kitchen table, mechanical pencil in hand, sketching building designs while his mother got ready for her hospital shift. "Baby," she'd say, adjusting her nurse's uniform, "them drawings gonna take you somewhere if you stay focused." She'd been right. The scholarship to Georgia Tech's architecture program had been his ticket out. While other students went to parties, Jordan spent countless nights in the studio, perfecting every line, every calculation. Now, at 34, he was on track to make partner at one of Atlanta's most prestigious firms. The drafting table in his mother's kitchen felt like another lifetime. His phone buzzed. Cynthia Park, his business partner and closest friend. Her name on the screen made him smile. "The suit better be on already," she said when he answered. "I'm not dealing with a late groom." "Still got 3 hours," Jordan replied, glancing at his watch. "Everything set at the venue?" "Perfect as it should be for what you're paying." There was a pause. "You know, for all that Marietta money, the Callaways sure let you handle a lot of the costs." Jordan moved to the window, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Adrian's family had some setbacks recently. Besides, I wanted things done right. Cynthia's tone carried a weight he chose not to examine. "Just make sure she loves you for you, Jordan, not what you built." He laughed, pushing away the slight discomfort her words stirred. "Always looking out for me, aren't you?" "Someone has to. You're too busy looking out for everyone else." After hanging up, Jordan's eyes fell on the property deed sitting on his desk. Adrian had been insistent about having her name added before the wedding, practically urgent about it. He'd agreed, telling himself it was a gesture of trust, of commitment. Still, something about the conversation had left him uneasy. He shook off the thought, focusing instead on the day ahead. The venue was an historic estate outside Atlanta, all marble columns and manicured gardens. 200 guests would witness him marrying the woman who'd walked into his life 3 years ago at a charity auction, captivating him with her warmth and grace. The drive to the venue was quiet, Jordan's mind drifting between present and past. He thought about Aunt Bertie, who'd helped raise him back in Memphis, who'd be sitting front row today. "A man builds his life brick by brick," she always said. "Make sure each one's solid before you lay the next." At the venue, the coordinator whisked him to a private room for final preparation. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The flowers, the music, the timing. Jordan adjusted his bow tie in the mirror, studying his reflection. The man looking back at him had earned every step that led to this moment. 20 minutes before the ceremony, a knock at the door broke his reverie. Douglas Calloway entered, his usual confident bearing notably absent. Jordan had always respected Adrian's father, a man who carried himself with the kind of dignity that came from old Atlanta roots. But this Douglas was different. His hands trembled as he poured himself a glass of water from the crystal decanter on the side table. He wouldn't meet Jordan's eyes. "Everything all right, sir?" Jordan asked, concern creeping into his voice. Douglas took a long drink, then set the glass down with deliberate care. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, each word seeming to cost him physically. "Son, leave my daughter before it's too late." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I'm not supposed to say this, but I can't watch you walk in there." Before Jordan could process the words, before he could form a response, Douglas turned and walked out, leaving only the echo of his warning and the faint scent of bourbon in the air. Jordan stood perfectly still, his architect's mind already beginning to assemble pieces he hadn't known were connected. The property deed, the wedding costs, Cynthia's careful words, and now this, a father's broken whisper. Jordan stood motionless in the private room, Douglas's warning hanging in the air like a physical weight. His architect's mind, trained to analyze structural integrity, to spot weaknesses before they become catastrophic, began working automatically. The deed transfer, the rushed timeline, the family's financial pressure. Each piece clicked into place with devastating precision. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his bow tie with steady hands. What struck him most was how calm he felt. Not peaceful, but focused. The same clarity he found when solving complex structural problems. This was just another problem to solve. First, he needed more information. The clock showed 15 minutes until the ceremony. Jordan straightened his shoulders, checked his cufflinks, and made his decision. He would walk down that aisle. He would say his vows. He would smile for photographs. And all the while, he would watch, listen, and confirm what Douglas's warning truly meant. Walking to the altar felt like moving through water, everything slightly distorted, but crystal clear. Adrienne appeared at the end of the aisle, resplendent in white, and Jordan studied her with new eyes. Her smile was perfect, practiced. He wondered how many times she'd rehearsed this moment, this performance. He smiled back just as perfectly. "I do," he said when the time came, his voice steady and warm. The guests saw exactly what they expected to see. A man in love, overcome with joy. Only Cynthia, standing with the other guests, noticed something different in his eyes. When their gazes met briefly, he saw the question in hers. He filed that away too. The reception unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, and Jordan played his part flawlessly. He gave a heartfelt toast that made Adrienne tear up. He laughed at the best man's jokes. He danced with his new wife, holding her close as the photographer captured their first dance. During that dance, he caught Cynthia watching them. Her expression was careful, controlled, but he knew her too well. She'd been trying to tell him something for months, not directly, but in those small moments of hesitation when Adrienne's name came up. Another piece clicked into place. "You look thoughtful," Adrienne murmured against his chest as they swayed. "Just happy," he replied, and felt her relax slightly in his arms. She believed him. Of course she did. She'd never seen him truly angry or hurt. He'd always been the steady one, the patient one. Patient money, perhaps? The thought crystallized something in him. By the time they reached the honeymoon suite, Jordan's mind was operating with architectural precision, measuring twice, cutting once, as his first mentor had taught him. Adrienne fell asleep quickly, the champagne and excitement of the day catching up with her. Jordan waited, listening to her breathing even out. Then he reached for her phone on the nightstand. The messages with Victor Hale weren't even hidden. Why would they be? Jordan had never given her reason to think he'd look. He scrolled back 14 months, reading with the same methodical attention he gave to structural calculations. The truth unfolded in their casual exchanges, their comfortable intimacy. Victor wasn't an ex. He was present, constant, waiting. Their plan emerged in pieces: target a man with assets, establish joint property ownership, engineer a separation, extract maximum value. They'd selected him specifically for his stability, his success, his trusting nature. Patient money, Adrian had written 3 months ago. He's so focused on building things, he never looks too closely at what's happening around him. Mom says that's exactly the type we need. Victor's response: 2 years max. Then you're free, we're set, and your family's problems are solved. He'll never see it coming. Jordan read every message twice, committing key details to memory: dates, times, specific mentions of the property deed, references to future plans. His mind catalogued it all with professional detachment. When he was done, he placed the phone back exactly as he'd found it. He lay down beside his sleeping wife, the woman who'd spent 3 years constructing an elaborate facade, and stared at the ceiling, his body completely still. He thought about Douglas's whispered warning, too late and too weak to be true conscience. He thought about Cynthia's careful attempts to make him look closer. He thought about the deed transfer, sitting in his office like the first crack in a foundation. Most of all, he thought about building. Everything in his life he'd built from scratch: his education, his career, his home. He'd learned early that proper construction required planning, patience, and precise execution. Now, in the dark of his wedding night, Jordan began to build something new. Not a life with Adrian, but a response to what she'd done. Like every project, he would start with the foundation. The Aruba air hit them like a warm embrace as they stepped off the plane. Jordan carried their bags through the open-air terminal, watching Adrienne's face light up at the turquoise waters visible beyond the palm trees. She squeezed his arm, and he smiled down at her with practiced ease. "I can't believe we're finally here," she said, her excitement genuine. That was the thing about Adrienne. Her joy wasn't fake, just selective. Like an actress who enjoyed her role while remembering it was still a performance. Their oceanfront suite at the Ritz-Carlton featured floor-to-ceiling windows and a private balcony. While Adrian unpacked, Jordan ordered champagne from room service. He'd planned this honeymoon 6 months ago, paid for every detail. Now each carefully chosen luxury felt like props in a stage play. "You think of everything," Adrian said when the champagne arrived, curling up next to him on the balcony. The sun was setting over the Caribbean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I try to," Jordan replied, his arm around her shoulders. He felt her relax against him, completely at ease. Why wouldn't she be? She had no idea that he'd seen the messages, that every gentle touch and loving word now served a different purpose. Over the next 3 days, Jordan maintained his performance with architectural precision. He took her snorkeling, arranged beachside massages, ordered her favorite wines at dinner. Between activities, he asked the kinds of questions any newlywed might ask about their future together. "Your parents seemed stressed at the wedding," he mentioned casually over breakfast their second morning. "Everything okay?" Adrian stirred her coffee, and Jordan watched the slight shift in her expression, concern layered over calculation. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Mom's been struggling with some financial stuff. The family home needs major repairs, and there are some other issues." She trailed off, letting the silence do its work. Jordan nodded encouragingly, playing his role perfectly. "She'll probably ask to borrow about $80,000 from us," Adrian continued, watching his reaction carefully, "just until they can refinance some things. Would that be okay?" Jordan reached across the table and took her hand. "Of course we'll help family," he said warmly. We're all in this together now. The relief in her smile told him everything. This was exactly the response she'd hoped for. The first step in their planned extraction. He wondered if she was texting Victor about it later, celebrating this small victory. Each night after Adrienne fell asleep, Jordan went to the hotel gym. The space was usually empty at midnight, just him and the steady hum of treadmills. On their third night, he finally made the call he'd been preparing for. Cynthia answered on the second ring, despite the late hour. "Jordan, everything okay?" He started the treadmill, letting the rhythm of his feet ground him. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen first." For the next 20 minutes, he laid it out methodically. Douglas's warning, the messages, Victor, the scheme. His voice remained steady, factual, like he was walking her through construction specification. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Cynthia spoke. "Jordan, I knew something was wrong. The way she'd dodged certain questions, how her stories never quite lined up." "I know," he cut in. "I should have listened. But don't let that matter right now." Another pause. "What do you need?" "Two things. First, I need everything you can find on Victor Hale. Business records, past relationships, patterns. Second, contact Marion at the real estate firm. Tell her we need to review the deed transfer documentation. Say it's for tax purposes." "Consider it done," Cynthia replied. No hesitation. This was why they'd been friends for so long. She understood action over emotion. The remaining days of the honeymoon unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Adrienne lounged by the pool, completely relaxed in her seeming victory. Jordan played the attentive husband, while his mind worked on foundation plans for what would come next. On their last morning, they packed unhurriedly. Adrienne chatted about dinner plans with her parents that weekend, already laying groundwork for the loan request. Jordan helped her zip her suitcase, his touches gentle, his smile warm. At the airport, they boarded their flight back to Atlanta. Adrienne took the aisle seat, flipping through a magazine. Jordan sat by the window, watching the island paradise recede below them. His reflection in the glass looked exactly as it always did, calm, steady, patient. Only now, that patience had a purpose. The Atlanta heat hit them like a wall after the island breeze. Their house, Jordan's house, stood quiet and familiar as they pulled into the driveway. Adrienne immediately started unpacking, hanging her clothes in the master closet while talking about paint samples and curtain fabrics. "I'm thinking a soft sage for the living room," she said, running her hand along the current cream-colored walls, "something to bring the outside in." She was already making the space hers, exactly as planned. Jordan nodded, watching her mark her territory. "Whatever you think works best," he said, his voice warm and accommodating. He'd built this house from careful planning and years of savings. Now he watched her stake her claim, knowing it was temporary. Over the next few days, Adrienne filled their home with interior design catalogs and fabric swatches. She scheduled painters and window treatment consultants. Jordan maintained his routine. Early mornings at the firm, focused work days, evening returns to a house slowly transforming under someone else's vision. Tuesday morning, a week after their return, Cynthia appeared in his office doorway. "Got a minute?" Her expression was controlled, professional. Jordan nodded, and she closed the door behind her. She placed a thick manila folder on his desk. "Everything's here. You'll want to sit down for this." Jordan opened the folder and began reading methodically. Victor Hale's contracting business showed modest success, but his pattern emerged clearly in the documentation. Two women, Rachel Martinez in 2018 and Samantha Cooper in 2020, had married wealthy men, only to divorce within 3 years. Victor appeared in the background of both situations, maintaining connections throughout. "The P.O. box was the first red flag," Cynthia said quietly. "They've shared it since 2021, 8 months before you met her." Jordan's hands remained steady as he turned pages. The LLC documentation hit harder. Callaway and Hale Ventures, incorporated in January 2021. Adrian and Victor, listed as co-founders. 8 months before the charity event where she'd accidentally bumped into Jordan, spilling her drink on his suit. But here's what sealed it, Cynthia continued, pulling out a statement from a woman named Felicia Davidson. She used to date Marcus from Adrian's friend group. Felicia confirmed that Adrian was asking very specific questions about you, your firm, your properties, your family background, 6 months before you ever met. Jordan read Felicia's statement twice. The charity event had been engineered. The spilled drink, her embarrassed apology, the coffee date to replace his suit. All of it carefully orchestrated. The LLC wasn't dormant either, Cynthia added. There were wire transfers. I'm still tracing those. Jordan closed the folder carefully. Thank you, he said, his voice level. I need to process this. He spent the day focused on work with laser precision. The community-centered designs needed refinement. The youth spaces needed better flow, more natural light. He adjusted sight lines, modified ceiling heights, perfected every detail. At lunch, he ate at his desk, reviewing contractor bids. Evening found him in his home office, the house quiet, while Adrian attended a girls' night that probably included Victor. Jordan picked up his phone and called the one person who'd always seen through pretense. Auntie, he said when Aunt Bertie answered, I need your wisdom. He told her everything, the wedding day warning, the messages, Cynthia's findings. Aunt Bertie listened without interrupting. When he finished, silence filled the line for several long moments. You got 2 choices here, she finally said. You can burn it all down fast and hot, let the anger drive you. Or you can do it clean, surgical, precise, no mess left behind when it's done. What would you do? Jordan asked. Baby, I'd do it clean, Aunt Bertie replied. So when it's done, you can stand up straight. Anger leaves marks on the soul. Strategy just leaves lessons learned. Jordan nodded, though she couldn't see him. I hear you, Auntie. I know you do. You always were the kind to think before you move. Don't stop now. After hanging up, Jordan sat at his desk for exactly 5 minutes, letting Aunt Bertie's words settle into his bones. Then he picked up his phone again and dialed the number Cynthia had given him earlier. Patricia Osie's office, a crisp voice answered. This is Jordan Whitfield. I need a confidential consultation with Ms. Osie tomorrow morning if possible. It's regarding a sensitive family law matter. The assistant scheduled him for 8 a.m. Jordan wrote the appointment in his calendar with the same steady hand he used for architectural notations. Then he went upstairs to sleep beside his wife, who would never see him coming. Patricia Osie's office occupied the 10th floor of a sleek Buckhead high-rise. Jordan arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in his usual tailored suit. The receptionist led him to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, where Patricia, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, stood to greet him. Mr. Whitfield, she said, extending her hand. Cynthia spoke highly of you. Thank you for seeing me so quickly. Jordan took a seat, placing his leather portfolio on the polished desk between them. Patricia settled into her chair, folding her hands. Tell me what we're dealing with. For the next 20 minutes, Jordan laid out the situation with architectural precision. The marriage, the discovery, Cynthia's findings, the LLC, the pattern with Victor. He didn't inflate or emotionalize. He presented facts. Patricia took notes, her expression neutral. When Jordan finished, she looked up. First, let's map your exposure. The investment property deed transfer is our primary vulnerability. When was it executed? 3 weeks before the wedding. Recent enough to challenge on grounds of administrative error or misrepresentation. We'll file a correction immediately. She made another note. Your primary residence? Solely in my name. Never added her. Retirement accounts? The same. Patricia nodded approvingly. Smart. Many clients come to me after joint titling everything. You've given us room to maneuver. She opened a desk drawer and retrieved several forms. We'll start the deed correction today. It's a straightforward filing. Property records show a clear chain of sole ownership before the transfer. We'll cite administrative error and process it without notice requirements since it's restoring original status. Jordan reviewed the correction paperwork as Patricia continued. Now, before any confrontational moves, we need to create a documented paper trail. Every interaction, every financial decision needs to support our position that you acted in good faith while others demonstrated pattern and intent. Her mother is about to request an $80,000 loan, Jordan said. Family financial troubles? Patricia's eyes sharpened. Perfect opportunity. We'll draft a formal loan agreement with specific repayment terms and, this is crucial, an acceleration clause triggered by marital dissolution. When they default, which they will, it becomes leverage. They won't read it carefully, Jordan noted. They're desperate for the money. Exactly. People see what they expect to see. Patricia began typing on her laptop. I'll have the loan agreement ready this afternoon. Presented as helpful and professional, just standard documentation for family record keeping. Jordan spent the next hour reviewing additional protection strategies with Patricia. She was thorough, anticipating angles he hadn't considered. By the time he left her office, the deed correction was filed, and the loan agreement was being drafted. 3 days later, Pamela Calloway made her move. She arrived for Sunday dinner, waited until dessert, then launched into a carefully practiced speech about temporary family hardship and the blessing of having successful children who could help. Jordan listened with perfect sympathy. When she finished, he smiled warmly. Of course we'll help. I'll have the funds transferred tomorrow. I just need everyone to sign some basic paperwork my business attorney requires. Pure formality. He retrieved the loan agreement Patricia had prepared. Pamela barely glanced at it, too relieved by his easy acquiescence. Douglas signed without reading, his hand shaking slightly. Jordan wondered if he recognized the weight of what he was signing. Adrienne watched the process with casual disinterest, clearly viewing it as her husband's excessive organization at work. None of them noticed the acceleration clause buried in Section 4, Paragraph C. The deed correction processed smoothly the following week. The county recorder's office accepted the administrative error, filing without question, restoring the investment property to Jordan's sole ownership. Adrienne never saw the paperwork. Property records weren't something she monitored. That evening, Jordan sat alone in his home office, reviewing the signed loan agreement. The signatures stood out stark against the white paper. Pamela's flowing script, Douglas's trembling scrawl, Adrienne's casual flourish, all of them signing exactly what he needed them to sign. He placed the agreement in a locked drawer alongside Cynthia's research file, Victor's pattern, the LLC documentation, Felicia's statement. The foundation was set. Each document represented a carefully placed stone in the structure he was building. Like every project he'd ever designed, this one would stand or fall on the strength of its foundation. Jordan closed the drawer and turned the key. The late October evening wrapped Jordan's home in comfortable darkness as guests began arriving for dinner. Adrienne had spent the day preparing. Her specialty, chicken marsala. Fresh flowers arranged just so. Wine breathing on the counter. Jordan watched her fluid movements through the kitchen, noting how at ease she seemed hosting in a home she planned to leave. The doorbell chimed again. Adrienne's smile brightened noticeably as she went to answer it. Jordan heard the warm greeting from his position by the kitchen island, where he was uncorking a second bottle of Cabernet. "Jordan, honey," Adrienne called. "Come meet Victor. He's an old friend I've been meaning to introduce you to." Jordan set down the wine opener and turned, his expression perfectly pleasant. Victor Hale stood in his foyer, tall, well-dressed, projecting easy confidence. This was the man from the messages, the architect of his wife's deception, now extending his hand with practiced charm. "Victor Hale," he said smoothly. "Great to finally meet you. Adrienne's told me wonderful things." Jordan stepped forward, and shook his hand firmly. "Welcome to our home. Can I get you a glass of wine?" The evening unfolded with practiced social grace. 8 guests total, arranged around Jordan's dining table while Adrian served her carefully prepared meal. Jordan engaged easily in conversation, discussing recent projects at the firm, laughing at the right moments, playing the role of contented husband. But he watched. He noticed how Victor's gaze lingered on him a beat too long when others were speaking, assessing, measuring. He caught the subtle shift in Adrienne's posture whenever Victor spoke, a slight angling toward him, an unconscious tell. Most tellingly, he observed the flash of contempt that crossed Victor's face when Jordan mentioned his latest community center project. It was quick, barely perceptible, but it revealed everything about how Victor saw him. A successful man who had built something worth taking, but not smart enough to protect it. Jordan filed that look away carefully. It would matter later. "The chicken is amazing, darling," he told Adrienne as she cleared plates. Her smile was warm, practiced. She touched his shoulder as she passed, a gesture meant to be intimate, now revealed as performance. The guests lingered over coffee and dessert until close to midnight. Victor was the last to leave, his goodbye handshake to Jordan carrying that same subtle edge of superiority. Once the door closed, Adrienne moved through the kitchen cleaning up, humming softly. "That went well," she said, loading the dishwasher. "Victor's great, isn't he? Such interesting stories about his contracting work." "Very interesting," Jordan agreed, helping her wrap leftovers. He noticed how she avoided direct eye contact when mentioning Victor, another tell he'd learned to read. Later, after Adrienne had gone to bed, Jordan sat in his office and made a phone call to a private investigator Cynthia had recommended. He scheduled a meeting for the following morning. The investigator, a former police detective named Marcus, proved efficient. Within 2 weeks, he delivered a manila envelope to Jordan's office. Inside was a series of high-resolution photographs. Adrienne and Victor, at an intimate restaurant in Buckhead, 4 weeks after the wedding. Her hand on his arm, leaning close, speaking in a way that suggested far more than old friendship. The timestamp in the corner was irrefutable. Jordan studied the photos carefully before locking them in his office drawer alongside the growing file of evidence. Each new piece felt like another brick in the wall he was building, not around himself, but around them. That evening, a detail from the original LLC documents kept nagging at him, something about the timing of the incorporation versus the listed business activities. He called Cynthia from his car. "I need you to dig deeper into that LLC's financials," he said when she answered. "The registration dates and initial funding sources don't align with standard practice. Look for any money movement, especially wire transfers or electronic deposits." "You think there's more there?" Cynthia asked. "There's always more," Jordan replied. "People get careful about the big moves, but lazy about the small ones. Check everything." "I'll start now," she said. "Give me a few days to be thorough." Jordan ended the call and drove home, where Adrienne was preparing another dinner, just the two of them this time. She greeted him with a kiss, asked about his day, moved around their kitchen like she belonged there. He answered her questions, returned her affection, and gave away nothing. Jordan was reviewing floor plans for the community center project when Cynthia's call came through. He answered while marking a potential revision on the blueprint. "Hey, I need to adjust the northwest corner measurements," he started. "Jordan?" Cynthia's tone made him set down his pen. Something in her voice carried the weight of discovery. "What did you find?" he asked quietly, turning away from his office window. "The LLC wasn't dormant." Cynthia paused, and he heard papers shuffling. "I traced 2 wire transfers, $47,000 total, coming from an account I didn't recognize at first. It took some digging through my contact at the financial compliance firm, but I found the source." Jordan waited, his hand perfectly still on his desk. "The transfers came from Douglas Calloway," Cynthia continued. "He borrowed against his rental property in Decatur, what little equity was left in it, and funneled the money to Adrienne and Victor's LLC. This wasn't just once. He did it systematically over the course of a year. Jordan, this was happening before you even proposed. The silence stretched between them. Jordan processed each detail with architectural precision, fitting new information into the existing structure of what he knew. When was the first transfer? He asked finally. 14 months before the wedding, Cynthia replied. The second one came through 3 months later. Both went directly into the LLC account. Jordan thought about Douglas's face in that hotel room, the trembling hands, the whispered warning that came far too late and far too small. He wasn't trying to protect me, Jordan said, more to himself than to Cynthia. He was protecting himself. Jordan, I'm sorry. I know you thought maybe he was— Don't be sorry, Jordan cut in, his voice level. Just be thorough. Send me everything you found. Every transaction, every date, every document. Already done. Check your secure email. After ending the call, Jordan sat motionless at his desk. The community center blueprints lay forgotten beside him as he examined the shape of this new betrayal. He had carried a small space of sympathy for Douglas, the broken man who at least tried to warn him, who seemed crushed by guilt. Now that space closed like a vault door, silent and final. The rest of the workday passed in careful routine. Jordan attended 2 client meetings, approved material selections, and signed off on contractor payments. No one looking at him would have seen anything different in his demeanor. But inside, something had hardened, the last piece of uncertainty calcifying into resolve. At 5:30, he closed his laptop and made a call to Patricia Osei. "Let's talk about timing," he said when she answered. He heard papers rustling on her end. "Everything's in position," Patricia replied. "The deed correction is complete. The loan agreement is properly filed. The asset documentation is comprehensive. When do you want to move?" Jordan looked at his calendar, considering. "Sunday." "Are you sure? We could take another week to—" "Sunday," he repeated firmly. "Have everything ready." Driving home, Jordan maintained the same careful composure that had carried him through months of discovery and preparation. He pulled into the driveway of their house, his house, and saw lights on in the kitchen. Through the window, he could see Adrienne moving around, preparing dinner. He entered through the garage, set down his briefcase, and walked into the kitchen. The scene was picture perfect. Adrienne in an apron, music playing softly, something aromatic simmering on the stove. "Hi, honey," she smiled, stirring whatever was in the pot. "I'm trying that new recipe from the cooking show we watched. How was your day?" Jordan sat at the kitchen table, watching her fluid movements. "Productive," he replied warmly. "The community center project is moving forward. How was yours?" "Oh, you know, the usual office drama," she laughed, adding seasoning to the pot. "Sarah from accounting is feuding with the new hire again. And Mom called. She's thinking of hosting Sunday dinner this weekend." "Sounds nice," Jordan said, his voice carrying just the right note of interest. Adrienne continued chatting about her day, about weekend plans, about the recipe she was attempting. Jordan responded with practiced ease, adding comments and questions at the perfect moments. To anyone watching, they would have looked like any happy couple sharing their evening routine. But as Jordan watched his wife move through their kitchen, he thought about Douglas Calloway's wire transfer, about the rental property in Decatur, about the careful construction of betrayal that had been built long before he ever met Adrienne. He thought about Sunday coming, and Adrienne, stirring her pot and planning Sunday dinner with her family, had no idea that everything was about to change. The Sunday evening light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the granite countertops. Adrienne had outdone herself with dinner: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of the Pinot Noir they'd discovered on their honeymoon in Aruba. The domesticity of the scene was perfect, carefully composed, like a photograph in a lifestyle magazine. Jordan sat across from her at their kitchen table, taking measured bites and responding to her animated story about her latest work project. He noticed how she leaned forward slightly when she spoke, how her hands moved with practiced grace, all part of the performance he'd watched for months now with new eyes. "The client actually loved the revised proposal," Adrienne said, reaching for her wine glass. "I think we might land the whole account by next quarter." "That's impressive," Jordan replied, his voice carrying just the right note of pride and interest. He took another bite of salmon. "The seasoning on this is perfect, by the way." Adrienne beamed. "I finally got the herb ratio right. I was thinking maybe we could host your team for dinner soon. Show off the new dining room setup." Jordan set down his fork with deliberate care. He reached for his phone, which had been sitting face down beside his plate. "Before we make plans," he said quietly, "I want to show you something." He placed the phone face up on the table between them. On the screen was a message thread. Her messages with Victor, time-stamped 11 days before their wedding. The particular exchange displayed was explicit about their financial strategy, including the phrase "patient money" that had burned itself into Jordan's memory that first night. Adrienne's fork paused halfway to her mouth. For exactly 30 seconds, her performance held, confusion crossing her features, then the beginning of what might have been an explanation. Then everything shifted. The mask slipped, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "That's private?" she said, her voice tight. "You went through my phone?" Jordan reached into his briefcase beside the table and removed a folder. "The messages were the beginning," he said, laying out the first document. "This is the LLC registration. You and Victor, 8 months before we met. That was an old business venture. These are the wire transfers from your father," Jordan continued, placing another document beside the first. $47,000, borrowed against his rental property in Decatur, sent to the LLC while we were dating. Adrienne's fingers gripped her wine glass. "You don't understand. This is a statement from Felicia Thompson," Jordan said, adding another paper to the growing collection, "confirming that you asked about my financial status 6 months before our random meeting at the charity event." Tears welled in Adrienne's eyes. Her voice wavered. "Jordan, things got complicated. I developed real feelings for you. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Jordan placed the private investigator's photograph on the table. Adrienne and Victor at Watershed Restaurant, 4 weeks after the wedding, his hand on her lower back, as they entered through the side door. "The feelings look complicated," Jordan observed mildly. Adrienne's tears spilled over, but her eyes had turned calculating. "You'll regret this," she said, voice hardening. "I'm entitled to half of everything, the investment property alone." "The deed transfer was corrected last month," Jordan cut in, his voice remaining level. "Administrative error in the original filing. Your name is no longer on it." "That's not legal." "Patricia O.C., my attorney, confirms that it is." Jordan's tone remained conversational. "She's been working on this for months. The loan agreement your parents signed is now in default. The acceleration clause triggered by marital dissolution requires full repayment within 60 days. He slid the final document across the table. The divorce petition, already bearing his signature. Adrienne stared at the papers surrounding her, each one a carefully constructed piece of the trap she hadn't seen coming. The performance had crumbled completely now, replaced by something between fury and disbelief. "All this time," she whispered. "You were just—" "I was paying attention," Jordan said simply. He stood from the table, his dinner barely touched. "I'm not angry, Adrienne. I'm done. Those are different things." He turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving her sitting at the table surrounded by the evidence of her own miscalculation. The sound of his footsteps on the hardwood was measured and unhurried, like everything else he'd done since that first night with her phone. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of the Calloway family home in Marietta. Jordan parked his Tesla in the circular driveway, noting how the property's impressive facade masked the financial rot beneath, much like the family itself. 3 days had passed since Adrian moved her belongings out. She'd taken surprisingly little, perhaps finally understanding that her claim to their shared life had been built on shifting sand. The house felt cleaner without her things, like a fever breaking. Jordan straightened his tie and walked to the front door. He'd chosen his charcoal suit carefully, the same one he'd worn to close his biggest architectural contract. It fit him perfectly, a subtle reminder of what he'd built through discipline and talent. The doorbell chime echoed inside. After a moment, Douglas opened the door. The older man's face went slack with recognition, then tightened with something between shame and fear. "I'd like to speak with both of you," Jordan said quietly. Douglas nodded, stepping back to allow Jordan entry. The foyer opened into a formal living room where Pamela sat rigid on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. Her attempt at a gracious smile faltered when she saw Jordan's expression. "Let's sit at the kitchen table," Jordan suggested, not a request. They moved to the kitchen, a bright space with granite countertops and high-end appliances. Jordan noted the Viking range, the Sub-Zero refrigerator. Appearances mattered deeply in this house, even as the foundation crumbled. Jordan took a seat across from them. The morning light streamed through windows that overlooked an expertly landscaped backyard. This was the table where they'd likely planned it all, the strategic targeting of a successful black architect who'd be too grateful for their daughter's attention to look closely at the mechanics. "I know about the LLC," Jordan began, his voice measured and clear. "The one Adrian formed with Victor 8 months before she approached me." Pamela's fingers twitched against the table's surface. Douglas stared at his hands. "I know about the wire transfers, Douglas," Jordan continued. $47,000 from your Decatur rental property, funneled through that same LLC. The timing is interesting. Regular payments while your daughter was positioning herself in my life." Douglas's shoulders hunched slightly, but he said nothing. Jordan removed the loan agreement from his briefcase and placed it on the table. The crisp legal document seemed to hum with potential energy. "This agreement," Jordan said, tapping it with one finger, "contains an acceleration clause triggered by marital dissolution. The full $80,000 is due within 60 days. He paused, letting that sink in. "If payment isn't received, the matter goes to a collections attorney. Patricia Osei has the paperwork ready." Pamela's face flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, but Jordan raised one hand, a calm, definitive gesture. She closed her mouth, perhaps recognizing that her usual tactics would find no purchase here. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft ticking of an expensive wall clock. Douglas continued to study his hands, his shame a palpable thing. Pamela's breathing had grown shallow, her carefully maintained composure cracking around the edges. Jordan stood, straightening his suit jacket. He'd said what needed saying about the money, but there was one more thing, not about the legal consequences, but about the weight they'd have to carry. At the door, he turned back. His voice remained level, but carried an edge of steel earned through years of being underestimated. "I came from nothing and built everything with my own hands. You looked at what I built and thought I wouldn't notice you picking the locks. That's what you'll carry. Not what you lost, what you thought of me." He walked out without waiting for a response, his footsteps echoing on the herringbone brick path. The morning air felt clean and sharp in his lungs. Behind the wheel of his Tesla, Jordan pressed the start button and felt the quiet hum of powerful engineering. He pulled away from the Callaway home without a backward glance, leaving Marietta and its carefully maintained facades behind. At the first stoplight, he connected his phone through the car's system and called Patricia's office. Her assistant put him through immediately. "Patricia Osei, it's Jordan. You're authorized to proceed with collections if they miss the 60-day window." "Understood. I'll have the team ready." Jordan ended the call as the light turned green. He accelerated smoothly, heading back toward Atlanta and everything he'd built. The Atlanta Tech Center buzzed with energy as professionals networked over cocktails and passed hors d'oeuvres. Jordan moved through the crowd with easy confidence, stopping occasionally to chat with colleagues and potential clients. His firm had just won the bid for a major development project, and several people wanted to discuss the details. He was speaking with a commercial developer when he felt a shift in the room's energy. Victor Hale had arrived, working the crowd with the smooth charm of someone who believed deeply in his own immunity. Jordan continued his conversation, knowing it was only a matter of time before Victor made his move. 20 minutes later, it happened. Jordan was at the bar getting a club soda when Victor materialized beside him, ordering a Scotch neat with the casual air of someone who belonged exactly where he was. "Jordan Whitfield," Victor said, his smile practiced and sharp. "Been a while." Jordan turned slightly, his expression neutral. "Victor, heard about your firm's success," Victor continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Must be satisfying, focusing on work without distractions." The bartender delivered their drinks. Jordan took a slow sip of his club soda, letting Victor fill the silence. "Speaking of distractions," Victor said, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "Adrienne and I have been reconnecting, getting back to where we should have been all along." He watched Jordan's face carefully, hungry for any sign of pain or jealousy. Jordan set his glass down deliberately. "That's nice." Victor's smile flickered at Jordan's calm. He pressed harder. "She tells me the divorce terms weren't quite what she hoped for. Shame how these things work out sometimes. Is that what brings you over here, Victor? Sharing relationship updates? Just making conversation. We're all professionals here." Victor's tone dripped with false sincerity. Jordan turned to face him fully now. "Actually, I'm glad you came over. There's something you should know." His voice remained quiet, measured. "I've spoken with both women. The ones before, Adrienne." The change in Victor's expression was subtle, but unmistakable. A tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. One of them in particular, Tressa from Buckhead. She's quite thorough. Being an accountant, she documented everything. The targeted introduction, the financial manipulation, the $60,000 you extracted. Jordan took another sip of his club soda. "She's been waiting for something specific." Victor's knuckles whitened around his Scotch glass. "Waiting for what?" "A pattern," Jordan said simply. "Her attorney advised her that 2 incidents could be dismissed as coincidence. But 3? He shook his head. "3 is a pattern, Vic. Have a good evening." Jordan walked away, leaving Victor frozen at the bar. He made his way through the crowd, shaking a few more hands, and left the event exactly when he'd planned to. 7 months passed like clockwork. The divorce finalized with Adrienne receiving far less than she'd anticipated. Her attorney visibly frustrated by how thoroughly Jordan had protected his asset. The Calloway family home appeared on real estate listings, its carefully maintained facade unable to halt their financial unraveling. Tressa's civil fraud complaint hit Victor like a precision strike. The documentation was meticulous, the pattern clear, the legal strategy refined through years of preparation. Other women came forward. Victor's carefully constructed world began to crack. 2 years flowed by. Jordan's firm thrived, his reputation for excellence and integrity drawing high-profile clients. The groundbreaking ceremony for his affordable housing development in southwest Atlanta marked a personal triumph. 200 families would build their futures there, each home a testament to what could be built from honest foundation. His personal life settled into something real and unguarded. The woman he was dating asked him once, over dinner at a small Italian place, what he wanted from life. He told her the truth, about building things that last, about integrity as a practice, about the difference between success and worth. She didn't flinch or perform understanding. She simply nodded and asked better questions. One evening, driving home from a client meeting, Jordan found himself on a familiar street in Marietta. He didn't slow down. The memory of Douglas's shaking hands in that hotel room surfaced briefly. The whispered warning that came too late and too small. I left, Douglas, he thought, hands steady on the wheel. Just not the way you meant. The street disappeared in his rearview mirror as he drove on. Forward, clean, and free. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.